The stars were out in Washington spring scrimmage.
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into another edition of the Locked On Huskies podcast. I'm Roman Tomashoff. That's Lars Hanson. He's site editor with Athlon Sports' Inside the Huskies. I'm the site editor with Huskies Wire. Thank you for making this your first watch or first listen of the day, as we are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKDOWNCollege for $20 off your first purchase. We've got a really fun show coming out all day, every day today. But just a quick reminder, wherever you get this podcast, whether it's here on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, make sure to click that like button, click that little bell so you never miss when we post a new video, and smash that subscribe button as well, as it really does help us out. And if you're on the audio-only side of things, make sure you leave a 5-star review, as all that helps us out. And for all the spring practice stuff that we're going to be posting, you're going to find it on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok as well, at Locked On Huskies. In all those places, follow us over there as well. Lars, we got a whole lot to get to. We're going to talk about Caleb Presley hitting the transfer portal. Got a whole lot that we need to get to from the spring scrimmage. The offensive line was really, really impressive. But one of the biggest things for me was Demond Williams just continues to show, both with his arm and his legs, that he is going to be one of the best quarterbacks in the Big Ten.
So I'm glad you said that in an exact way, because I can't say who it was, but I'll just say I reached out. I had an everydayer reach out, call him a friend of the program, and echoed those sort of same things where we were talking about a different player, but it came back to Demond is going to surprise so many people this fall with what he does. And I know, just like in 2023, when we're the only ones saying, hey, Washington is a national championship contender. I'm not saying, again, that UW is a national championship contender this season, but I'm saying, like, the faith that we have in Demond, there's a reason for it. You can see every single day how it's like not too big for him. He's already knowing how to read defenses and kind of not getting goaded. And he's still making the occasional, but very more occasional questionable read. Let's just say not even bad read, but just questionable read, where maybe you're okay, let's try to go to the next one. But everything that Demond has been doing in the spring so far is telling me, like, all the steps that he needed to take, and also validating Jedd Fisch playing him in every single game last season, because you can see those little details coming into play when they're going into some of these situational drills and team periods where, oh, hey, it's 11 on 11, but they're working on certain things. It's, 3rd and 2, 3rd and 5, those sorts of things. And I just can't wait to see, like, as long as, again, we'll talk about in the second segment, the offensive line can stay together, UW could actually have something this season.
Absolutely. Where I want to talk about two particular plays today that Demond made with his arm. The first one was kind of towards the end of practice, where Audric Harris was somebody who I was really impressed by today. He made a couple of really nice grabs. He was on the receiving end of both of these from Demond Williams. Or the first one, as I look at my little notebook here, he made a really nice back shoulder grab during the final. We call it the Sandstorm drill, because that's the song that Jedd always plays to signal like a 2-minute drill. And it's always a lot of fun. It's usually a very competitive period. He made a really nice back shoulder throw to Audric Harris, who had to reach back, and showed really nice body control in midair to pull it in. And he also threaded the needle between two defenders. I know Alex McLaughlin was the safety over the top. I can't remember who the corner was on that side of the field, but with Audric Harris working out of the slot, he ran a post route and pulled in an 18-yard touchdown pass that was on a really, really tight window throw between those two defenders. And it's just so nice to see him continue to improve. We talked about it with Derek Zammit, right? As sometimes he'll just make sure he's making the high percentage throw. That's not a high percentage throw. That is you have to be very confident in your arm to make that sort of throw in the back of the end zone. And he threaded two defenders perfectly, and it was a nice touchdown throw. So seeing that, along with the athleticism that we all know that he has, is so much fun. And I want to talk about Audric Harris for a minute here, because he's somebody who we got a chance to talk to him a little bit after Thursday's practice, and it was really nice to hear him not only talk about his relationship with Roma Dunze, which is also always really cool, but just to hear about how he wants to get better, not only as a blocker, but as a route runner, and really sticking in the slot, and how that's important to him, because he's somebody who, as we've seen early on in camp, I think he struggled with drops a little bit at certain points in time, but I think he made up for those today with both those really nice tight window throws. And as he continues to develop chemistry with Demond Williams, I'm not super concerned about those things moving forward.
Exactly, for all the reasons you just mentioned, where similar to when we talked with Audric, he was mentioning I played, the X, the F. So he basically played all three wide receiver positions, at least got reps in game at that point. Yeah. What he said was that kind of allowed me to kind of figure a lot of things out. kind of experienced a few things. So when you say like going and getting those back shoulder, finding the back of the end zone, literally the back of the end zone, not just getting in the end zone, it's the back. That's a totally different realm of toughness when it comes to being able to A, thread the ball, and then B, come down in such a narrow area. But that's why all those little reps go into play, where Audric, we knew coming from Bishop Gorman, was going to be a high caliber player, let's just call it that, where you knew from certain high schools, like, yeah, those guys are pretty good, but you still have to develop them and coach them. And I think that was the important thing, where he was another guy who came in last spring, one of those, one of the 3 freshmen, and we're like, okay, well, he ended up being the one that played for a couple of different reasons. But now you're starting to almost see, like, well, because he played and because he did burn his red shirt, where I remember you and I talked about that last year, which, like, well, that's a wasted burned red shirt. Like, whatever. Okay. Now you actually see, okay, well, long term, you're thinking if he stays for 4 years, that freshman year is the foundation year, not a burnt year.
No, absolutely. That's certainly a big part of it, where the more, you look into it, where, he didn't necessarily get a ton of reps, but the reps that he got, as Jedd Fisch will say with any of the freshmen who were on the field last year, is that they were all valuable reps, and there was a purpose behind them. And now seeing him compete with Kevin Green in the slot for that starting role is really important. Like, Chris Lawson had a solid day today, but I would say that of all the wide receivers, I think Rasheed Williams made the best play. He made a real nice fingertip grab on a go ball down the near sideline. That was really nice to see. But I think Audric Harris probably had the best day of any of the pass catchers, which is just really promising moving forward, because just all those guys in the slot, we saw what that looked like in this offense last year. When we talked to Audric, he talked about what Jacob Cowing did at Arizona and how that's some of the film that this coaching staff was having him watch. That's all really important for what this offense can be moving forward. But Lars, we got to flip over to the defensive side here before we move on, because Rashawn Clark had another interception today. And this one was really fun, where Dash Byerly didn't necessarily make the best read. He was rolling out and was trying to escape a sack, so he just kind of threw it downfield, and it just fell right into the arms of Rashawn Clark for, as we're counting, his 5th interception now of the spring across all sorts of drills. And he took it back to the house, where he had a caravan in front of him for a 45-yard touchdown. The defense was having a lot of fun with it. So seeing all those things, it's really nice to see, because we've had this conversation with a few of our insiders, but the more we look at it, he just seems to be running away with that starting slot role.
Yeah. And again, I don't disagree. Like, for everything you said, like, I don't disagree with it. I just think, like, I'm curious to see who else is going to step up in that position with him, where no doubt this spring he has been like the guy. I'm just curious, can that this is not doubting Rashawn. This is more or less just saying, because again, he's still, I believe, a true sophomore or redshirt freshman?
Redshirt freshman. So
you're thinking of a guy who didn't burn his redshirt last year. So obviously by proxy, you didn't need to. And I think as a result, you're looking at that and thinking, well, as long as he can carry that through the summer and into the fall, I don't doubt that he could end up being like the best start, like nickel at the end of the season. I'm just curious if like Dyson or anybody else kind of tries to make it a little interesting in fall camp, because somebody's got to make this interesting. Like, I just have a feeling like that room is too deep to where somebody else might test him that's a veteran. But otherwise, like, this is his position to lose. I think I agree with that.
So I agree with you there in terms of somebody's going to test him. I think it would be Dyson McCutcheon. I've got some more thoughts on that, but I'm going to save them for a little bit later in the show, because we got a chance to talk to some of the offensive linemen today, and Carver Willis in particular was a very impressive person to talk to. And we'll get to that right after a message from our friends over at Supply House. Get the supplies you need from the site made for the skilled trades, Supply House. Whether you're in plumbing, HVAC, or electrical work, Supply House is the reliable way to order products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right. Plus, with a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from 400-plus top brands, you'll find exactly what you need, delivered fast from coast to coast. Need help with an order? Supply House offers expert support and industry-leading service, so you'll always talk to a real person. And for trade pros, look for an extra edge. Their free Trade Master program offers exclusive perks like a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every order. Thousands of skilled professionals are already taking advantage. Now it's your turn. Join the Trade Master program today at supplyhouse.com/TM and start ordering plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies with just a few clicks. Plus, use promo code SH5 for 5% off your first order. That's supplyhouse.com. Lars, we got a chance to know him a little bit during the offseason media day event, but we got a chance to talk to Carver Willis after practice today. And he is just such an impressive person to talk to. he was asked at what particular he felt he needed to improve on, because he said that he doesn't feel like he's all the way there at left tackle yet. And he said, well, do you guys want the O-line talk answer or the basic answer? We said, of course we want the detailed answer. And he, first of all, again, just incredible person to talk to. A lot of fun to get to know. But he went into great detail about how he feels and he needs to improve on his punch and on his jab as he slides into his stance. He said his base is getting a little wide and a whole bunch of other different things that our good buddy in front of the program, Alex Katzen, wrote about over on Huskies Wire. So you can go check all that out over there. But it's one of those things where hearing somebody give that detailed answer about knowing exactly where they need to improve, and especially on a day where the offensive line looked really solid, where they did a really good job holding up against a defensive line that Jedd Fisch had a ton of praise for. It's really nice to see. Yeah, it feels like this group really is making those strides that we didn't see last season. And now with a bigger, much deeper unit are certainly much needed this season.
Exactly. It's why you could see when they prioritize getting a veteran tackle, and this is not just speaking of the tackle positions, but not with, because we can get to Gear later on. But when I got to talk to him in February, it was clear, like, oh, this is a guy who is no nonsense, trying to prepare for the NFL, basically looking for like that college prep to NFL year. And that makes sense with his answer when you think about it. Like, what does the NFL care about? Details. Like, how do you separate a first and second and third round pick? It's how clean are you? How efficient are you? And then how many of those reps can you stack in a row? That's why he came to Washington. He literally said that. He's like, look, I didn't even need to visit. I just talked to the coaching staff and I was like, look, here's what I'm looking for. Here's what the coaching staff is offering. Yep, it's exactly what I want. Cool. Don't even need to think about it. And also worth noting, and again, this is kind of what is great about Carver, and you'll appreciate this. When I was like, Avery, like, pretty good dual threat quarterback. Damon, was that a pretty easy? He's like, yeah, no, Avery can run too. And I'm like, exactly. And I think that having that type of left tackle with the specific quarterback that you have, because there is a little bit of mental, prep that goes into that when you think of if you have a pocket passer, you got to hold up a little bit more. Having a dual threat quarterback, you need to have a little more athletic offensive lineman. I think Carver fits that bill specifically. And looking at, the fact that he thinks, again, knowing he can get better, obviously, but those specific areas, now we can look in fall camp and say, like, hey, did you feel like you made the strides you did? Where I remember talking to Parker Willis, like, hey, it was about size. This is just about specific technique. That can be coached. He's already got the size and experience and everything else.
No, absolutely. That's such an important part of this when we think about this particular offensive line, right, where we talked about John Mills, Champ Talia, who we saw both those guys take a couple of reps with the first team today. It was mainly Zach Henning and Garrett Hatchett getting that rotation at right guard, where there's going to be some inexperience on this offensive line, where we know Pakifi now basically has the left guard position. It seems like locked up the more and more we continue to watch him. But outside of, Landon Hatchett got a full year of starting last season, just a full year of playing. I know he didn't start in every game, but a full year under his belt experience-wise, but he was coming off the injury. So it's a little bit of a different mindset. And he spoke to that today saying, yeah, it's a whole lot different for me just knowing that not only I'm entrenched at my position, but it's something where I know that I don't have to worry about coming off an injury and trying to make sure I'm strong enough. It's improving my body in all the right ways, just on top of that. So that's certainly something that can be said. We're having a fifth-year guy like Carver who has so much starting experience under his belt can just continue to anchor that offensive line as, Drew Party improves it. Whoever starts at right guard continues to improve as well. And then, on top of that, there's all the true freshmen. And one thing that really stuck out to me was Landon Hatchett mentioned it as well today, was he was talking about Mike Brewster, the assistant offensive line coach, and said he's somebody who played a lot on the interior, and he's been specifically working with us on the interior, with the centers, with the guards, because he knows what needs to happen at those positions. And it's a bit of a testament to Jedd Fisch to say, yeah, going out and finding somebody to specifically work with the interior guys is certainly crucial and certainly very helpful. But on top of that, just having on the coaching staff side of things, right, where making sure you're using just the rules to your fullest advantage is a nice part of that. But just seeing how well that's worked for Landon, who I think we've seen make big improvements this spring, is very important.
Yeah, I think I remember that was one of the first things that stood out just when he came out to practice this spring, seeing Mike Brewster. Just looks like an offensive lineman because, by the way, he was a former offensive lineman. And just, this like when he gets down into that like stance and you can just see like he's fully invested in it. That's exactly why you have those assistant GA quality control types where there's a clear line of progression to where if you want to stay in the coaching business and work your way up, it's an organization. That's why, when coaches say, hey, this is our organization, and Jedd specifically, it's an NFL organization. It's, hey, we have this assistant coach. We promoted him. I forgot who mentioned it, but I think like Rocky Seto was mentioned recently. And it was like, same sort of thing where like a Pete Carroll guy.
Taylor Mills mentioned him.
Thank you. Okay. I was like, I know there was a UW poll in there somewhere. I should remember who said it, but it was one of those same things where like, it's a perfect example where a coach is mentioning it. So now think about that, like down the line, if Mike's an offensive line coach, either at UW or somewhere else, like, hey, I can go back and look at my time at UW and say like, hey, this helped me and these sort of things. And so that's why adding all of those players, it wasn't just like, hey, let's go get a former Ohio State guy. Let's go get a former NFL guy in JP Lossman. No, get these specific types that actually work with your system, and then pairing him with Switzer has been a great combination because Switzer, like when I watch him coach, again, there's no slight to Brennan, but you could just see the technician a little bit different, in Switzer versus Carroll, where Carroll was kind of like, here's, like the physical, like, you're right up there. Switzer seems to be like everything. It's like every rep after every player, there's always a little bit of coaching, and it's like it's always one or two details. And so pairing that with what Carver said, it's like those details are going to get refined and coached, and that's again like why you go and add all these guys to the staff.
No, absolutely, and it's that part of it is so just fun to think about because it is building just to use your term again, an organization. But I think about that from the terms of the young guys because we asked we asked Mike Switzer about John Mills, Chantilly, all those sorts of guys. And we asked Carver Willis about him as well. And one of the things that Carver said was, yeah, all three of Mills, Talilia, and Jack Schaefer came in at somewhere between 350 and 360 pounds. Like they were that big coming in. And it's just one of those things where you have, like, you kind of think of it like a block of marble is probably the best way to put it. And you can chisel what you want out of it because in the same way that, you're getting these guys to drop weight and getting what you want out of them, you're just trying to refine a whole lot of different things about what they bring to the table. And it's really interesting to see that because it's something Mike Switzer said. So it's always fun when you have two guys with the same name that coach the same position. But with one of the things that Mike Switzer mentioned was, yeah, we would like to have a starting five on the offensive line. We would certainly love it if it were that way. But if we have guys 6, 7, and 8 that we are comfortable with contributing, there's certainly no harm in putting them out there and finding ways to take advantage of, fresh bodies and just having a solid just group like that, solid rotation, which is something we know worked really well for Ryan Grubb in 2023 when that group won the Joe Moore Award. And obviously, you got a first-round tackle and a second-round tackle, so that really helps. But at the same point where if you have a deep group that if, you never want to root for an injury, but say somebody misses a couple of weeks, somebody else steps up and it's, hey, yeah, we're comfortable with that rather than, oh, we have to throw in this guy where, you and I both really like Paki Finau, where if there was any point last year where all of a sudden Paki Finau had to step into a starting role, I think you're more so concerned, hey, is he really ready for this physically? Obviously not so much mentally where you can see that when he plays, but it's, hey, yeah, that's just where we are depth-wise. And you don't have that problem this season because you have so many more offensive linemen just in the boat.
Yeah, and it's just crazy to think about like how much a year makes difference. Pocky's a perfect example of that, where it's like we both knew like high upside. We were talking about the Troy Fautano comps before, which is start inside, we'll work outside, we'll figure out the rest down the road. The fact that he's winning the starting, we could basically say like he's winning the starting left guard job. Every time I kept tweeting out like, hey, here's another veteran lineman, here's another veteran. And it wasn't a slight Pocky, it was just like, oh, that was Garrett. Okay, that makes sense. Yeah. And that's become that 600 because to your point about the injuries, aside from 23, like, can you name the last time a Big Ten school made it through the entire season with all 5 starting linemen? Like, that's a rare, like, if so, God,
I mean, even 2023, they didn't.
Right, right, exactly. But bless, like, but that's my point. Is like you want your starting 5, but you also need to have a solid like 6, 7, 8 in reserves so you can plug and play. And that's why getting all that rotation and getting some of the young guys to play early on in the season will be important because A, the depth, And then B, again, with the portal and everything, you want to make sure guys are thinking, hey, I'm competing on Saturdays and at practice. They're giving me a chance, and not just, hey, here's a couple practice reps just to keep me around.
No, absolutely. That's a big part of it. And that all showed up on the field on Saturday, because I want to talk about the defensive line after the break. But one of the first things that really stood out, and shout out to our good buddy Coker, who we saw in the stands for a little bit, who just, I kept hearing him, oh man, I'm so impressed with this offensive line. It looks so much better. It's true. It does look a lot better. And against a defensive line that has done a really good job putting pressure on whoever's in the backfield, Damon Williams, Kai Horton, Dash Biley, all 5 quarterbacks. I don't need to list them all off, but whoever's back there, the defensive line has done a really good job putting pressure on the quarterbacks. And to see the offensive line in this, full competitive, full scrimmage sort of just mode where they ran 110 plays today, seeing them hold up as well as they did for all the quarterbacks was really, really nice to see, and just showed, yeah, it seems like this group is really ready to take a big step forward this fall, which, Lars, leads into a couple of conversations we need to have, but we'll start on the defensive line. Right after a message from our good friends over at Game Time. There's nothing like the atmosphere of an NBA playoff game. Every bucket, every defensive stop, every moment feels huge. It's electric in the arena, and with Game Time, you can be part of it without the stress of last-minute ticket hunting. Game Time makes it fast and easy to get playoff tickets, even when demand is sky high. Prices on the app actually go down as tip-off gets closer, and their last-minute deals can save you up to 60%. I love Game Time because their last-minute deals are fantastic. Again, you can save up to 60% off by buying a last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and so much more. And with the all-in pricing, it means no surprise fees at checkout. What you see is what you pay. I can't wait. I'm going to keep an eye on those last-minute deals for the Kendrick Lamar concert in May. That's going to be a lot of fun. You can take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKDOWNCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. Lars, one of the first things that Jedd Fisch mentioned today was, and he kept correcting himself, which is really funny, was, yeah, I really like the front four. Now, the front five. Oh, it's the front seven. Like they're all playing really, really well. And that's something that we've certainly highlighted on this show. And we've seen a lot where Ontario Thompson has plays where he just absolutely wrecks everything that's going on. And it's nice to see, these big defensive tackles at nose, whether it be Simone Pepa, Logan Sagapolu doing their job, taking out double teams, whatever else it might be. And we've seen Alinius Davis have his moments. Bryce Butler's had a couple of moments. And just as this, Bryce Butler had a couple of nice pressures today as well. But as this spring continues to roll on, I just can't help but feel really, really comfortable about the direction this defensive line is heading.
We really need to make a book of Jedd, note of Jedd, like the Jedd-isms. Like it's just so funny to watch. And again, it's with all love and respect. It's not to slight Jedd in any way, but it's just funny when a coach is like, hey, it just kind of goes all of that. But it's honestly a good thing where you're not asking like, we don't know who we're going to have to step up. We might have to rely on this ex-freshman or this, player that's coming in the fall or, X, Y, Z. And by the way, that wouldn't be a bad thing. If a freshman emerges, so be it. But more often than not, especially in the Big Ten, you're looking at the, juniors, seniors, maybe a couple of, sophomores, redshirt freshmen. But for the most part, though, it should be a top heavy on down, no pun intended, because that's what they went to the portal to get. You got a bunch of upperclassmen and said, you know what, let's go get the girth. Let's go get the kind of athleticism some guys we're familiar with, and put it all together with Ryan Walters. And I think that all that paired together, it's not just getting the individual players, it's also how they're used, because I think that it all plays together. And coincidentally enough, Ryan wasn't even a part of all that, which just makes it even better.
So I want to talk about one particular play, which probably got the biggest audible reaction from anybody over the course of the day. And that's, with all due respect, Luke Gayton had a really nice one-handed touchdown grab from Dash Byerly. But the loudest audible reaction I heard from anybody was a play really early on. And it goes exactly into what you were saying about finding ways to utilize guys properly, where at Sacramento State, Deshawn Lynch was at his best when he was a stand-up outside linebacker. There's a play today where Cade Eldridge was coming across the formation in motion on, and it ended up being just a run play to the right. And Deshawn Lynch just absolutely lit him up and just knocked him on his back. And it was one of those things where, yeah, if he can take a step forward in that role, he's one of those guys where it's, hey, I'm really excited about what he can do just in this role and as part of this defense as a big edge center, right? Where we were on this show last year saying, hey, maybe he can be utilized a little bit more inside because he's got really nice athleticism and he's got the proper size to, find ways to take advantage of that on the interior. But that clearly was not how this coaching staff felt. And as the season rolled on, it sort of proved that. So now I'm really curious to see what kind of step forward he might be able to take as an outside linebacker. So that's just somebody I certainly recommend keeping an eye on. But Lars, another thing that really stood out to me, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but when we talked to Jonah Coleman a few weeks ago, one of the first things he said was, I need to get better at learning the route tree. That's the next step for me is I want to get better as a pass catcher, finding different ways to get involved in the offense, through the air. And we saw that today with his route running, his ability as a receiver. I was really impressed.
Who was it? It was the Michael Turner comparison. It's very real. Where again, capable pass catcher, not a guy where you're thinking of a Christian McCaffrey, and that's again, this is no slight to Jonah, but he doesn't need to do that. But in times where, hey, maybe it's not working in the red zone or kind of in that middle 40 range, and you want to dump him off to a screen, you don't have to sub in an Adam Muhammad or Jordan Washington. You can actually use, again, the reason why I say that is you can use tempo. There's certain things where if you want to go and do certain things on the field, you have to be able to have all your starters do it so you can actually keep everybody in. And that's where, when you talk about Jonah deciding to come back, everyone's like, hey, it's a big deal. It's like, it is, but how are you going to take advantage of it? That's the other side of this equation. And I think got the perfect coach and Scotty Graham to make him do it. Jedd Fisch, the perfect scheme to call it for him because how much he likes to get one-on-one matchups. And then just imagine a bowling ball in one-on-one space. Like I'm taking Jonah 9 out of 10 times. Like it's pretty easy bet at that point.
No, I'm glad you say that because Jonah's best play of the day was I think they were working, it might've been 7-on-7s or that 9-on-9 drill that they do, where he reached out and made a really nice one-handed catch and he turned upfield and they weren't working on tackling at this point in time. And there were two guys that were converging on him. I believe Dyson McCutcheon was one of them. I can't remember who the other one was, but sitting there with our buddy Christian Capel and just hey, if that's a live, because we were saying, should we give Jonah a touchdown for that? Because if it were a live rep, he was running through whoever is standing in front of him because it was at about the 2-yard line. And that's one of those things where you have to find ways to utilize that physicality. And it's one of the reasons that, seeing him go through this offseason transformation with his body was so important because seeing him find ways to just take the fullest advantage of his senior season with an improved offensive line, with Damon Williams in the backfield, who's going to help him out so much in that regard is so important because all of those things matter in the long run. And seeing how he can just play all of these things to his advantage in his final season are going to be really interesting to watch. But Lars, last thing before we get out of here, we have to talk about Caleb Presley. So he decided we didn't see him at practice on Saturday. And as we're sitting there, practice about to begin, it's, it looks like he's entering the transfer portal. So this is one of those ones where we talked about it a little bit earlier. And this is why I wanted to circle back around to it, where losing Caleb, who is one of the top recruits in state in the 23 class, was a nice flip away from Oregon on signing day. Unfortunately struggled with injuries a lot over his time at Washington. You think about it, and obviously the optics of that aren't great, but I look at what Leroy Bryant did today, and I say, I feel like it was a competition between those two at a certain point.
And again, like we talked about yesterday, competition is the good problem to have here. And I think, when we looked at that room, it was, okay, if Jedd is adamant about 85, well, there's going to be certain positions that you look at, and with the young guy, you still have a couple of freshmen coming in, not to mention, including Dylan Robinson at cornerback. Yeah. So you're looking and thinking, well, one of those positions is going to have some attrition. It's not a cutting guy. It's not for lack of Caleb being able to play. It's just, some guys like, hey, like he's good enough to go find a place to play, and good players want to go find, want to play. So I can understand, I understand the frustration of fans saying, hey, well, what happened to toughing it out and competing for like 3 or 4 years? It's like, I get that. I do. But in this day and age, I would almost kind of be concerned if a kid stays for 3 or 4 years because, like, why did it take you that long to pop when, hey, if it doesn't work after a couple of years, go try something new. Maybe, we've seen guys go to Boise State and a number of other schools, and you can find it and make it work. And even if it's at a lower level in terms of a Mountain West or whatever, playing time is better than just kind of trying to bide your time. And then what happens if you get hurt 2 or 3 years down the line and now you don't even get that chance?
So there are two schools of thought there. Because one of them, and you're absolutely right in the way of, why is this person waiting around for 3 or 4 years to get a shot? where there are obviously cases where that applies, because we talked about one on this show the other day with Rashid Williams, who waited his turn, right, behind Roma Dunze. Now he's kind of waiting behind Denzel Boston. And it's, you see it every time he steps on the field. It's, yeah, this guy has it. He's going to find a way to make it work whenever he does get a full-time opportunity. But with somebody like Caleb, it was just unfortunate that it worked out that way because, you mentioned Dylan Robinson. That's a guy who you and I were talking about before Takario Davis was coming in where, hey, could that guy find a way to start? Like that's just the level of talent and, size and athleticism that he brings to the table. But on top of that, Leroy Bryant had a really nice practice today. And it's one of those things where when this coaching staff tried to move him into the nickel, it was, oh, that's really interesting. Where I know you and I have had conversations about that off air, and we're just kind of taking it on air before we get out of here, where it's, yeah, that's really interesting because he's got all the tools to play there. But Rashawn Clark has been so good there. Why are you going to block him now somewhere else with a guy who's younger than him? So that didn't necessarily make much sense, where you move him back outside, right? And, Leroy's coming in here for his third season, and he hasn't necessarily seen the field a whole ton. We know he got to start in the Sun Bowl and everything. But now it's kind of at the point where Leroy is right there on the cusp where he can be that CB3, CB4 this season. And it always felt like he was a little bit ahead of Caleb because he was able to stay healthy. Again, that's just nothing more than unfortunate. And then having Dylan Robinson, we're having those two guys compete alongside, this class of true freshmen, the other guys being Darian Clemens and Ramons Adams. All of a sudden that room gets really deep, and it almost is better for some guys at a certain point to go look for playing time somewhere else.
And it's no slight to either the coaching staff or the player. But credit to Caleb for staying for the staff, because he could have left after last season or before last season. Just said, what, hey, new staff, they didn't recruit me or anything, they didn't know me. I'm just going to leave and try something else and go chase it back. No, you stayed, you did it. It didn't work out for whatever reasons. Not even in Caleb's control. Now you go do right by you. Go find a new place. And by the way, if you ball out, cool. It's just another local kid who ended up making it work. And it doesn't mean it's a slight to the other staff for one, because let's say whoever, took his spot at UW, whether it's Leroy, Dylan, or whoever, ends up flourishing, this year and down the line, it's a win-win. Like, you don't look at it and say, hey, like, wow, like Washington really missed on that one, or Caleb really made a bad mistake. No, it can also be better for both parties.
Lars, as always, thank you so much for being here. Thank you to all everydayers tuning in. We really do appreciate your support. We got so much more fun stuff coming for you throughout the offseason. And tune in on Tuesday, because we didn't talk about any of the recruits that were on campus on Saturday. And yeah, there were a lot of them. So we're going to have more of that on the Tuesday show. Make sure you're up to date on all that. Make sure you subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, whether that's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music. We're there. We're everywhere. We're updating this channel with new content every single day. So make sure you click that like button, click that little bell so you never miss when we post a new video. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, drop them right down below in the comment section. And if you're audio only, please leave us a 5-star review. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll talk to you on Tuesday.